Hello, let's talk about the great new features in version 1.1 and 1.2 of Volumator. There's a whole bunch of great stuff in here, so if you are using Volumator, I definitely recommend you update to it. So the first thing I was going to show off is the new combine and separate tool. So previously we had combine, but once you combine two volumes together, then you couldn't break them out apart and you were kind of stuck with it, or you could just regenerate and lose the changes. Well, now we can actually break apart that combined volume into two, make edits to the two separate volumes, and then recombine them again at will. So as an example, we have this area here with a sort of a floor here and then a separate floor up here. But let's say we wanted to create a volume that covered this whole area, like a single volume. It's challenging to do that in a way that's going to capture all of the different topography of the two floors. So it's usually best to just capture one area per floor like this. So we'll carry this bit here and then we'll come up to this area here and we will capture this sort of floor here. And it doesn't have to be floors, it could be two sort of separate rooms, but in this case I find it useful for different floors. And so now we have our two volumes. So if I just show them, you can see them here and they've got slightly different shapes obviously. The only prerequisite for combining volumes is that they overlap. Now, of course, you can see that these do. And if you are curious, as long as you've got the two selected and you hit the report button, you will see whether or not they intersect. So as long as they do, you are free to combine. So now this is a single volume. And if we select the single volume, you can see it now has two data components, and that's how we separate the volume. So let's say that we want to break this apart. We want to tweak the sort of resolution or the vertices or whatever of this bottom section here. We can simply separate, and this again now separates it into our two volumes. And then we can tweak our resolution, let's say like this. Maybe with this one up here, we want to make it super coarse and we want to edit the vertices on it. And we're going to maybe make this come out a little bit further like this for some reason. And then we simply select them both and combine them. And there is our combined volume. The only caveats to be aware of is the settings. So when you have let's say this is our property on our volume. When we separate the volumes, the property goes to the first volume. The second volume gets default variables. And so when you recombine them, or when you combine them in the first place, just make sure that you select the volume with the properties that you want to be absorbed into the combined volume. So we'll select this one because it has properties on it and this one doesn't. So we select this one first, then this one, combine, and you can see that the combined volume has the property. So it's a really great feature though to cover multiple areas or areas that are really complicated. It's difficult to get the drone into different points, or maybe the shape isn't coming out exactly how you want, so it's easier to handle with multiple volumes. Great feature, really pleased I could get this working. So version 1.1 brought in a brand new generation mode called DelaVox. And these generation modes are different algorithms used to build the volume, so the output volume will look a little different depending on which one you pick. And of course, you can change these after the fact too, so you're free to try it out and see if it improves things for you. Let's have a little look at how it will compare to the other modes. So this is a classic perimeter mode. This is two paths here, so this will have slightly better integrity. It's less likely to have nasty problems if you get occasional like weird jutting spikes in that shouldn't happen. This will be a good fix for that, but it will be slightly less accurate. Voxel mode obviously is very different, so this looks kind of very blocky and perhaps slightly less accurate, but in some senses it's better because it has absolutely no warnings or errors, and it's very good for really spiky shapes like corridors and whatnot. But DelaVox mode is kind of a mix of both. So if we quickly regenerate this one, we can see that the concave sections, the curve outward bits like this, they look a little bit more like perimeter mode, whereas the convex shapes, the bit that cut in, look more like voxel mode. And it's because it's an intersection of the both. And so it's quite a simple volume shape, which can be quite handy, but it is perhaps not quite as accurate. And sometimes you can get some little artifacts where the voxels and the non-voxels are kind of like battling over the corners. But generally speaking, it's a really good alternative method. We also now have the ability to aggressively discard points around the barriers. And this means that you can ensure that your volumes have a very flat shape around the barriers. So this is helpful again for people using Wise, where they need like no edges on the portals. And it's just a setting that is found in advanced settings here, no edges on barriers, and it's actually enabled by default. And so you can obviously enable and disable it and see the effect that has on the volume. So let me just quickly build a volume here, and we can see we've obviously got a barrier here. And once this is built, let me have a little look. I'm going to select the barrier and the volume will show selected. So you can see the barrier here. And you can see that now there's a straight line going right through that barrier here. Whereas if I deselect this, which is what the behavior would have been before, and then regenerate the volume, you can see that an extra point has appeared here. And so it's just dependent on whether you do or do not want that. Now, I'm assuming that people do not want that. And so the default is to have no edges on barriers. So this will result in slightly less complicated volumes because any points around the barriers will get discarded. So this probably is a good thing, but obviously if this is a curved shape here, so you obviously want to keep an eye out for that, but most people won't be putting barriers on curved spaces anyway. And there's also been a ton of work done on improving detection of barriers as well, including improved handling of smaller spaces like windows. There's still some tweaks that I want to do. I think I can improve things further, but it's better than it was, and that's really good to see. In version 1.1, a new set of tweak buttons were added to control the simplify concavities. So if you didn't know, you can come to the edit panel here and use these buttons to nudge up and down whatever the current settings of the volume were. So you don't need to dig around in the generation buttons and make sure to recall whatever the current settings of the volume are. You can instead just add or subtract to whatever the volume currently has to it. Previously, we didn't have those buttons for simplify concavities, but now we do. And so we can really quickly tune what the right amount of simplify concavities is to get the sort of minimum complexity required to represent the space. This is really handy. And of course, you have the reset to go back to whatever was used to generate the original volume. Another great new feature is the preset system. So if we open up the widget settings here, you can see that we've got 3 new options here for presets. If you recall, the default settings are stored in a data asset, and you can find that here, listed here. So it's just a data asset that stores all of the settings used by Volumator. Well, now you can make multiple of these data assets and save and load them at will. So you could make a different data asset, for example, for large open area, or maybe a different preset for different volume classes or different barrier classes, or whatever you want, really. And it's super easy to set up. To load a preset, you would simply load in the one that you want to select, and then you hit the load button, and then your settings are updated in the widget here to reflect whatever was stored here. And likewise, if you want to save something, so let's say I want to change the sprite size for some reason, and we want to store that in our preset 1, we would simply press, as long as this is selected correctly, we just save preset. Now, if I open up the preset and I scroll down to widget settings, I should see that the sprite size has been adjusted here. And so then later on, we can just go and load this up. So this is a great way to make multiple here, and you can duplicate them and then load them or save over them at will with your current settings. Really helpful. You may also have noticed that we've got a couple of settings here that are new. So we now have name settings, so you can change the default names used by barriers and depots. Volumes that existed before in Generation Advanced, but I put all of the naming settings in here so that's kind of cleaner and out of the way. We also have a folder name, and that is for the outliner up here. So for example, let's say I'm going to call barriers something like Hello World. And I'm going to make a folder called I'm a folder. I can spell. And we're going to create a barrier here, like this. And you can see it's created a barrier called Hello World in a folder called I'm a folder. Great. So that's super helpful to organize your content and allows you to kind of keep on top of things so that you can find things easier. So you may notice this new setting down here for opacity color. And that allows you to obviously specify what color the volume should be, which is a great organizational tool. So the opacity color is set when you build the volume. And then if you regenerate a volume, so this is now the current color, by regenerate, it does not change the color. And that means that you can freely sort of modify volumes without worrying that their color is going to change. And instead, in order to change the color of a volume, you have to just simply select it, and in the edit panel, you just say change color. So let's specify a new color here, and we're going to change it like that. You can also, of course, change the alpha, and this is the transparency. So by default, it's set very low, so you can see through the volumes, but it might be that you actually want it to be really bold for one reason or another, and then that allows it to really stand out. Now, this feature works really well with the new preset system that I mentioned earlier. So, of course, you can specify colors in your presets. And so you can build up presets for different purposes and then have the volumes that are output look very different to each other. So it's really easy to get an at-a-glance view of which volumes are doing what. It's a great, handy little feature. One of the user-requested features was a warning that tells you if you're going to regenerate a volume and lose your vertex edited changes. So let's say I had this volume here and I want to tweak some of the vertices. Let's say this one here and this one here. For some reason, we're going to delete this one. We're going to commit those changes. For some reason, that's what we want. Now, if I was to regenerate this in the previous versions, it would have just done it, and then you would have lost those changes. Now, obviously, in this case, I've just made the changes. But if you were to come back in 2 weeks and run this, I wouldn't have known that these changes would have been lost. And so now, when we regenerate this vertex edited volume, we get a little warning that says confirmation required, and it says that it's been vertex edited, and you will lose those changes, but you have 10 seconds to confirm. So you just have to press the regenerate button or any of the tweak buttons, whatever it is you're doing. You have 10 seconds. If you don't do anything, then the confirmation goes away just like that, and you just get a little heads up there that you could lose changes. So in this case, I don't care. I want to lose the changes. I'm just going to regenerate, and there we go. We go back. And of course, if we do want to tweak existing changes from a vertex edited volume, we can just go back to edit vertices, and all of that stuff is still here, and it's a bit difficult to see in a nice white background. You can repeatedly vertex edit a volume to your heart's content. So here's a feature that's useful for people using Audiokinetic Wise. So if you're using that system, then you're likely setting your barrier volume class to acoustic portals. And if so, those portals need to be pointing in the correct location. And so if the shape is correct, but the orientation is wrong, then there was no easy way to fix it without fiddling around with all the values and everything. So I built a button called Reorient Barrier. And in this case, it's not necessary because this volume is facing in the right direction. And we can see that the lines here are pointing in the right direction. But if they weren't, we could click Reorient Barrier and boom, it shifts it so that it's now facing this way. And this can be handy in cases where maybe the detection has pointed it in the wrong way, or just other reasons why you might want to switch this, but keep the shape in the world the same. It will only work on volumes that have 0 pitch and roll rotation. So if you try to do it on a volume with, say, a little bit of roll, it will complain and say you can't do it. So you just need to ensure that this works. It's all to do with how the rotational maths works. But hopefully this will be helpful for people when they're working with their portals. And finally, we have some improvements to the report here. So there's extra columns in here, new information, such as telling you if it's been combined or edited, some other things here, and the data is being represented in a little bit cleaner way, more tooltips, all the usual stuff. And this is true across the whole board as well. There's been improvements and bug fixes all over the place. So hopefully you enjoy the new updates. And if you have any feedback or thoughts, please just reach out to me through email. Thank you.